All right, today we're going to tackle how to develop an ISMS implementation framework. This explainer is brought to you by EasyPathUni in collaboration with Yazan, Ibrahim, and our goal is to make this whole process really simple and clear. We'll use practical, real-world examples so you can see exactly how this stuff works on the ground. Okay, let's jump right in.
So, this is the big question, right? In a world where threats are coming at you from every angle, 24/7, how do you actually protect your most sensitive information? This isn't just some IT headache anymore. It's a fundamental business challenge. The stakes are just way too high for a messy, scattered approach. You absolutely need a solid strategic framework. And that framework is the Information Security Management System, or ISMS. The best way to think about it is as the master blueprint for your entire security strategy, all based on the global standard ISO 27001. And it's not just about firewalls and software. It's a whole system that weaves together your people, your processes, and your technology into one cohesive, risk-based strategy that actually builds resilience.
So, how do you actually build one? Well, the whole journey follows this simple but incredibly powerful cycle called Plan, Do, Check, Act, or PDCA. First, you plan your defenses, designing that blueprint. Then you do the work to build them. Next, you constantly check to make sure everything's working. And finally, you act on what you've learned to make it all better. It's a continuous loop, always improving.
So in this explainer, that's exactly what we'll do. We're going to walk through each of those phases, starting with the blueprint, moving on to the build, covering how to keep watch on your defenses, and finally, how to keep them evolving. Let's get to it.
First up is Phase 1, and it is all about the plan. This is your architectural stage. Think about it. You would never start building a fortress without a detailed blueprint, right? Same thing here. You need a solid plan that's locked in with your company's goals and the specific threats you're up against.
The planning phase really just boils down to answering these 4 critical questions. First, what are we actually trying to protect here? That sets your scope. Second, who cares if we get this right or wrong? We're talking customers, regulators, business partners. Third, what are the biggest, scariest threats out there for us? And finally, how are we going to deal with those threats? Getting these answers right and getting full buy-in from leadership is the absolute foundation for everything else.
And look, this is where the game has totally changed. Understanding today's threats means you have to look way beyond the classic lone hacker in a basement. We are now dealing with sophisticated nation-state attacks, massive vulnerabilities buried deep in the supply chain, and even AI being used to create new attacks. Your plan has to account for this new, more dangerous reality.
This slide shows just how much our response has had to evolve. You know, the old way was just kind of slapping a label on a risk, high, medium, low, which is pretty subjective. The modern way, using methods like FAIR, is all about quantitative analysis. It actually translates information risk into financial terms, dollars and cents. This lets you speak the language of the business and make way smarter decisions about where to put your money.
Okay, let's move into Phase 2, the Do phase. Our blueprint is done, it's approved, and now it's time for construction. This is where we roll up our sleeves and actually implement the controls and processes that become our security fortress.
The latest ISO 27001 standard gives us this amazing toolkit of 93 security controls. And what's really cool is they're now grouped into these 4 clear themes: organizational, people, physical, and technological. This new structure makes it so much easier to see how all the different pieces fit together to create a really strong, layered defense.
And this is super important. The standard isn't some old document gathering dust. The latest version added 11 brand new controls, and every single one is designed to tackle a modern challenge. We're talking about things like securing your cloud services, proactively gathering threat intelligence, and building security right into your code from day one. It shows the framework is really keeping up with the real world.
But here's the thing. You can have the most advanced technology on the planet, but it won't matter if your people aren't prepared. The source material couldn't be clearer. Human error is a massive factor in security breaches. That's why competence and awareness training is such a huge part of the Do phase. When you do it right, your employees stop being a potential weakness and become your #1 defensive asset.
So, our fortress is built. Awesome. But we can't just walk away and assume it's safe forever, right? That brings us to Phase 3, check. This is all about being the guard on the wall, constantly monitoring our defenses, actively looking for cracks, and keeping an eye out for new threats on the horizon.
And the key here is that monitoring isn't about guesswork or feelings. We use specific metrics, key performance indicators or KPIs, to measure exactly how effective our controls are.
We're talking hard data. For example, we track things like how long it takes us to spot and fix an incident, or what percentage of our systems are patched on time. This data tells us the real story of what's working and what's not.
This whole verification process involves a bunch of different activities. We use automated tools, often called SIEMs, that are constantly sifting through data to spot anything suspicious. We regularly run vulnerability scans and penetration tests, which is basically hiring ethical hackers to try and break in to find weaknesses before the bad guys do. And finally, independent internal audits give us that crucial, unbiased look to make sure the whole system is working like it's supposed to.
All of that checking and testing leads us directly into our final phase, ACT. Because let's be real, the threat landscape is always changing. The bad guys never stop innovating, so neither can we. The ACT phase is all about taking what we learned from the check phase and using it to constantly evolve and strengthen our defenses.
And this is why leadership comes right back into the spotlight. It is their job to regularly review everything, the audit reports, the performance data, the latest intel on new threats, and then make the big strategic calls. This is where decisions are made to tweak policies, move money around, or even change the scope of the ISMS to keep it perfectly aligned with the business. Now, for companies that want that official ISO 27001 certification, this timeline makes it crystal clear. This is not a one-and-done deal. After you get certified, you have surveillance audits every single year to prove you're keeping up. Then, every 3 years, you go through a full-blown recertification. The whole system is designed to force you to keep improving.
So as we bring this all together, if there's one thing you take away from this, it's that an ISMS is not a project. It doesn't have a start and an end date. It is a continuous, never-ending journey of improvement.
And the payoff for going on that journey is just immense. A great ISMS stops being a line item on the budget and becomes a true strategic advantage. It builds real, measurable trust with your customers and partners. It creates a culture where everyone is always looking for ways to get better. And ultimately, it makes your entire business tougher and more resilient for whatever comes next.
Which really leaves us with one final question for you to think about. When you look at your own organization, is security a static, one-off project that you just check off a list? Or is it a living, breathing, dynamic culture that's ready to adapt and evolve? Honestly, the answer to that question could make all the difference.